Most indie devs think their wishlist problem is a visibility problem. They think they're not getting enough eyes on their page, so they run a Reddit post, maybe get a content creator to play it, maybe post a clip that does alright on Twitter, and they watch people actually land on their Steam page. And then nothing. Their wishlists don't come. And they go, okay, Steam is just broken. Or, my game is too niche. Or, people just aren't clicking wishlists as much anymore. But here's the truth. The problem isn't that people didn't see your page. The problem is that when they got there, the first 3 lines you wrote told them nothing they actually needed to know. Today we're going to fix that. And by the end of this, you're going to look at your own Steam page differently. I promise you that. So let me tell you why this matters now. What's actually happening is when someone lands on your Steam page, they didn't come in curious. They came in scanning. They're a player. They've already seen 30 games this week. They scrolled through a Steam sale, which at the time of recording right now, the Lunar Steam sale is going on. They've watched a couple trailers, looked at a few pages, and their threshold for "this is for me" is set pretty high. Not because they're harsh, but because they've been through this enough times to know what a game that's not for them looks like. And they bail fast. So when they land on your page, they're not reading, they're skimming the top, they see your capsule image, your title, and then almost immediately, they look at your short description, those first 2 or 3 lines. That's the moment. That's the entire moment. And here's what most dev pages do in that moment. They list features. A roguelike dungeon crawler with procedurally generated levels, 50 plus unique items, and a dynamic weather system. I just made that up off the top of my head, but that's similar to what I've seen that doesn't work. I'm going to explain exactly why that kind of sentence is quietly killing your wishlist conversion, and more importantly, what to put there instead. But first, I need you to understand something about how players actually read, because once you get this, you can't unsee it. So you're probably wanting to know how players actually scan your Steam page. What we know about scanning behavior is not from game theory, it's just from basic human attention patterns. When someone lands on a page they've never seen before, they're not starting from the top and reading line by line. They're doing a quick visual pass. They're looking for signals that answer one unconscious question. Is this for somebody like me? That's it. That's the whole question. And that question gets answered, or not answered, in about 4 to 6 seconds. Because they've watched the trailer, they've looked at the screenshots, they've scrolled down to read the full description. It happens before all of that. The above the fold zone on Steam, which is the capsule area that is also including the short description, is doing almost all of the heavy lifting on that first impression. If it doesn't land, they scroll past or they close the tab. Now here's where the feature list problem comes in. A feature list is information, and information requires cognitive effort to process. When you write procedurally generated levels, 50 plus unique items, and a dynamic weather system, the player has to translate that into meaning. Sure, some players may already know based on genre familiarity, but if not, they have to ask, okay, what does that feel like? What kind of player enjoys that? Is that the experience I'm looking for right now? You're making them do the work, and they didn't come here to work. They came here to find a game, to relax and unwind. And they don't even realize that they're doing all these thoughts. It's all unconscious, and it's super quick. What converts them isn't information. What converts them is resonance. There's a difference between telling someone what your game has and telling someone what your game feels like to play. One is a spec sheet, the other is an invitation. And this is the core tension in almost every underperforming Steam page I've ever looked at. The dev wrote for themselves, describing the system they built, the mechanics they're proud of, the features that took months, maybe even years to implement. And while that makes sense, and I know you're proud of what you made, you want people to know what's in it. But the player isn't reading for specs. They're reading for fit. They want to know, is this the experience I want? Let's talk about what that actually looks like in practice. I'm going to tell you the 3 specific mistakes, the 3 patterns that I see over and over again in the first 3 lines of underperforming Steam pages. Mistake number 1, starting with genre labels instead of experience. A turn-based strategy RPG set in a post-apocalyptic world. That sentence technically describes the game, and genre is important, but it doesn't make anyone feel anything. Genre labels are orientation, not an invitation. They tell you where to file the game. They don't tell you why to play it. Compare that to something like, in this RPG, you're the last surviving commander of a broken civilization. Every decision you make is a gamble, and you're already running out of time. Like, I just came up with that on the spot. Same game, completely different emotional entry point. The first version asks the player to categorize, but the second version puts them inside a feeling while also telling them what the category is. Mistake number 2 is leading with mechanics instead of fantasy. This is the 50 plus unique items problem. 50 unique items is a mechanical stat. It means something to you as the developer, and maybe to hardcore players as well, and it does represent work, content depth, and replayability. But to a player skimming your page, that number is abstract. It doesn't connect to anything they can feel. The fantasy underneath 50 plus unique items is probably something like, every run feels completely different. You never play the same build twice. That's the thing the player actually cares about. You buried the fantasy. You led with the machine instead of the ride. Whenever you write a feature, ask yourself, what does this feature make the player feel or experience? That answer is what should be in your description. The feature itself can live further down the page where players who are already interested will dig into it. Mistake number 3 is writing for nobody specific. This is more subtle, but it's everywhere. Some descriptions are written so broadly that they could apply to any game in the genre. Explore a vast world filled with secrets. Defeat powerful enemies and forge your own path. That sentence could describe 50, 100, hundreds of games, thousands of games on Steam right now, which means it's doing zero positioning work. It's not telling the right player that this is for them, and it's not filtering out the wrong player either. The players who wishlist your game and actually buy it are specific people. They have a specific taste, they've probably played specific games before, they have an itch that they're trying to scratch. Your first 3 lines should feel like you're talking to that person directly. Not every person, that person. If your game is for players who love the punishing loop of roguelikes but are sick of games that feel too random, just say that. If it's for players who want a management game, but one that actually tells a story, say that. Arknight's Enfield did that recently, and people found out they are factory workers at heart. That specificity is the filter. It keeps uninterested players from wishlisting and then not buying, and it makes the right players feel like you read their mind. So here's the actual framework. This is what I'd walk through if I was auditing a page. Line 1, the fantasy, not the feature. Your opening sentence should put the player in a feeling or a situation. It should make them see themselves in the game. It should take them out of reality, the reality that they're trying to escape by playing a game. The goal is not to explain the genre. The capsule image already handled genre signaling visually. Your first sentence should do emotional work. Ask yourself, what is the core loop of this game going to make someone feel? Tension, freedom, power, paranoia, loss? Build that feeling into a sentence. Here's a bad example. A survival horror game with crafting and base building. Here's a better example. Something is hunting you, and you cannot see it because it's pitch black. You have until morning. The second version creates a situation. It puts you in it. It doesn't explain the game. It starts it. Line 2, the hook that separates you. This is where you do your positioning. What makes your game different from the 5 other games in your subgenre? And I don't mean features. I mean the emotional or experimental angle that's distinct. This is the hardest line to write because it requires you to have thought carefully about who your competition is and where you sit relative to them. But it's the line that does most of the filtering work. You need to ask, what are players who love this genre tired of? What are they wishing existed? If your game solves that, say it here, even implicitly. No hand-holding, no waypoints, just you, the map, and what you can figure out. That one sentence tells a specific type of player, the anti-casual crowd, the old-school exploration type, that this game was made for them. Line 3, the world or the stakes. This is where you introduce scope or consequence. You're not describing features here. You're answering, what's this world about, and why should I care? This could be a brief settling statement if your world is a selling point. It could be a stakes statement if your game has a strong narrative. It could also be a tonal line, something that locks in the mood of the game. The job of line 3 is to close the loop opened by lines 1 and 2. You've put the player into a feeling. You've separated yourself from the competition. Now you tell them where this experience lives. Put all 3 together and you have an opening that does 3 jobs in 3 sentences. Create resonance, signal differentiation, and establish stakes. That's above the fold messaging that actually converts. I'm going to walk you through a couple of conceptual rewrites so this becomes concrete. Beforehand, a roguelike dungeon crawler with procedurally generated levels, a deep skill tree, and 50 plus unique items. Every run is different. Build your perfect character and see how far you can survive. Now, again, not bad on its own, but it's missing the target audience, and there's too many descriptions like that. So how I changed it, you're not going to beat this on your first run, or your 5th, but every time you die, you understand something you didn't before, and that's exactly why you'll try again. Wow, that's way more impactful. But what changed? The feature list is gone. The genre visual signal is gone. But the emotional truth of why someone plays a roguelike, the pull of iterative mastery, the one more run psychology is front and center. That player who loves roguelites reads that and immediately recognizes their own habitat. They feel like they're at home. That's the resonance we're after. Here's another example for an atmospheric puzzle game. Beforehand, an atmospheric puzzle adventure with handcrafted environments, an original soundtrack, and a narrative mystery that unfolds as you explore. As you can see, I'm like falling asleep even saying that. After I rewrote it, you've woken up somewhere you don't recognize. The silence isn't peaceful. It's waiting. Every room you enter answers one question and asks 3 more. Again, the feature list is gone. Handcrafted environments and original soundtrack are still true of the game, but they're selling points for later, for the player who's already hooked, to keep them hooked. They don't belong in line 1. The mystery and tension belong in line 1. That's what converts the right kind of player immediately. Notice also that neither rewrite is particularly long. This isn't about writing more, it's about writing for the right thing. You don't want to overwhelm the player or potential customer by stuffing a bunch of words and keywords and jargon that they may not really care about. So here's the reframe I want to leave you with, because it applies way beyond this one element of your page. Your Steam short description is not a product manual. It's not the place to document what's inside your game. That's what the full description is for. What the short description has to do in 3 lines in the above the fold zone is make the right player feel like they've been waiting for this. That's it. That's the only job. Everything on your page will work harder once that job is done correctly. The trailer will feel more impactful because the player is already emotionally primed, or if they watch the trailer first, the short description will match the trailer's energy. The screenshots will land because the player is looking for confirmation, not explanation. A lot of screenshots are actually where players are relying on explanation. The tags will reinforce something the player already started feeling. But if those first 3 lines read like a spec sheet, none of the rest of the page gets a fair chance. The player already decided it wasn't for them, and they made that decision in a matter of seconds. You built your game over many years. You deserve more than 4 seconds of someone's attention to get a fair shot. Fix the first 3 lines, and the rest of the page will breathe better. So, what to do right now if you're a developer with this issue? Pull up your Steam page, or your current draft if you haven't launched yet. Read your short description, just the first 3 sentences. Ask yourself 3 questions. 1. Does this put a player inside a feeling or a situation, or does it describe features? 2. Is there anything in these 3 lines that couldn't also be said about a competitor's game? And if so, what makes your game more distinct from theirs? 3. If your ideal player read this cold with no context, would they feel like this game was made for them? If any of those answers makes you uncomfortable or doubtful, that's the work. Rewrite line by line using the framework. Fantasy first, differentiation second, stakes third. You don't need to overhaul your entire page to get a meaningful improvement in conversion. You might just need to fix what's sitting above the fold. Go do that. Then come back and tell me in the comments section what's changed. If you found this useful, I'm going to keep going deeper on this stuff. Not generic marketing theory, the actual mechanical stuff, the positioning work, the things most dev channels aren't touching. Because the games that get discovered aren't always the best games. They're games that made it easy for the right player to say yes. I know I've been one of them. Let's build pages that do that together.